Welcome to our lovely review video of chapters 1 and 2 of Gatsby. So in this video, we're going to go through the first two chapters. I'm going to talk about kind of what happens plot-wise, what happens thematically, how it relates to some of the stuff we've talked about in class, and then we're going to discuss some quotes that matter, some of the symbols, and so on. So this is kind of, as you're getting through the book and you don't remember what happened in these first two chapters, this is what this video is for. To kind of go back and rewind. It's not super comprehensive. It's not super long, hopefully, if I don't talk too much. But it will give you an idea of kind of what happens in this book so far. So the first thing we do is we meet Nick Carraway. He is our narrator. Remember, he's a first-person narrator, which means he is an imperfect narrator in some way. He either doesn't know all the information, which sometimes happens, or he's flawed, which is kind of the real big one here with Nick. Nick Carraway claims to not be judgmental. There is a quote early on that says, don't be judgmental, that Nick's father has told him. That says, don't be judgmental, because not everyone, basically, I'm paraphrasing, because not everyone grew up with the same advantages you had. So he claims to be the least judgmental person he knows. That is totally not true. He is absolutely judgmental, 100%. But by virtue of this not judging people, he also can blend into any crowd. And that doesn't mean that he necessarily goes unnoticed. It's that he just fits socially in any given situation. And because of this, because he can fit into any of these situations, he is able to kind of be part of a lot of different social circles and get a lot of different tidbits of information and gossip and insights into people. And that is his real key as a narrator. It's not the fact that he's not judgmental. It's the fact that he can fit in. He's so down the road, middle of the pack, that he can kind of fit in wherever he wants. He is from old money. There's a typo there. He is from old money. His grandfather, we find out, sent a surrogate to the Civil War so he could start a hardware business. And it's the hardware business that the family, the Carraways, still own today in Chicago, or in the Midwest, so to speak. Nick goes to the war. He's restless returning from World War I. He liked the action. We talked in class, and again, there could be people who are watching this who've never been in my class, who are just, I'm going to put this up on the YouTubes like the kids do. So if you're reading this, one of the big parts of this book, of The Great Gatsby, is this idea that the lost generation of writers, people who came back from World War I and realized that the nation that they thought they were living in, the nation they thought represented them, didn't. This idealistic nation, this positive nation, this optimistic America didn't exist. Because what happened was we got ourselves in a war that was fought for okay reasons, but they weren't the noble reasons as before. They weren't the noble reasons of 1812 and the Civil War and the American Revolution. So this kind of frayed that relationship that a lot of writers had with America. And this then leads to this lost generation of writers who don't really know where to go. Nick is of this lost generation, whether he realizes it or not. After the war, he doesn't really know what to do, but he knows he doesn't want to stay in the Midwest anymore. So he leaves to go to New York to work in the bond business. Something very interesting about this bond business. He doesn't really care about the bond business. Nick doesn't really know anything about the financial industry. He doesn't care about the financial industry. What his big thing is that it's a thing to do. And it's a thing that a lot of people are doing. So he can just sort of go with that. He doesn't really care or know anything about it. It's not his passion. He doesn't really have a passion. He just knows that it's a thing people have made money doing. So he's going to do it too. The only people he really knows in New York are Daisy, his cousin, and her husband, Tom, the Buchanans. Tom Buchanan is described as this big, hulking, even though he hates that word, brute of a guy who is constantly reliving his glory days of college when playing football. He was a nationally known football player, we find out in chapter 1, and he is reliving his glory days of being famous by constantly kind of seeking the next thing, whether that's polo, whether that's a giant house, or that's whatever. He's constantly seeking whatever comes next. He's that really pathetic guy who keeps reliving the one time in high school where they did a cool thing. That's basically Tom Buchanan in a very shallow nutshell. We find out that Nick is living right next to this mysterious character named Gatsby. If only someone wrote a book about it. We don't know anything really about Gatsby yet. All we know is that Nick is living next to him in a kind of forgotten little, not so great house that is between two mansions. One of those mansions being Gatsby's huge giant mansion in East Egg. East Egg, remember, in West Egg. East Egg is the old money part of town. West Egg is the new rich money part of town. But Nick doesn't quite fit into either one of those places. He is of old money, and his father has offered to stake him for a year to support his kind of moving out to New York. So he has things paid for while he tries to get his feet under him in the bond business. But he's not living in a fancy mansion either way. He's living in this kind of junky house next to a huge nouveau riche mansion. We meet Daisy. Daisy is flighty. Daisy is superficial. We find out later Daisy does this to hide her pain. Daisy is much smarter than she lets on, but there is also no benefit to Daisy in her society for being smart. So oftentimes when we read this book, and when we as teachers teach this book, we sometimes can get caught up in the fact that Daisy is superficial. She's only focused on, what clothes people wear. And the superficiality was a very important part of the 1920s. What clothes you wore mattered. It's going to matter a lot in this book. We're going to talk later on about how what matters is what a person's wearing or what they're driving or what their house looks like, those status symbols. We talked in class about what is more important, perception or reality. For them, perception very much matters, all right? And it's going to keep mattering as we go. Sorry, guys, had a thing. So we get the sense. We also meet Jordan Baker. We also meet Jordan Baker, who is a professional golfer. Now, we don't know much about her yet, but we know that she's sort of there. She's there in theory training, and that she doesn't really do much. We don't get a whole lot about her yet. We will, but not yet. We get an early hint that Tom might be abusive in his marriage. There's a bruise on Daisy's hand, and she says, "You hurt me, Tom. You didn't mean to, but you did. You big hulking brute of a man." And then Tom says that he hates the word hulking, as if the word is the problem here, not the fact that he hurt his wife in a very, very seemingly real way. We have Tom going on and on at dinner about a book that he has read that basically boils down what Hitler would end up talking about in World War II, that the white race needs to be purified, that it has been that, the white race is superior, that there is a physical and a mental superiority that has just been challenged and weakened over time. Tom is that guy who believes the smartest thing that he thinks he understands. He doesn't entirely, I don't think. We get the idea that this is a very new mentality for Tom, and that Daisy has heard it far too many times to listen to. And he's going on about this racist book. All of this stuff was part of Fitzgerald's life. Fitzgerald's life. It was part of his life. I'm sure it was something that he heard along the way. It was a mentality that existed at the time. The book and books like it existed What we know is that Fitzgerald doesn't believe it because he puts it in Tom's mouth. He puts those words in Tom's mouth to say, which then means that he is, he's not, Fitzgerald is not endorsing this by any means. Tom suddenly in the middle of dinner gets a phone call. And in this phone call, we get a very clear picture of what is going on in this marriage so far. And again, very early. He gets a phone call. He goes to take it. As he goes to take it, Daisy goes off and Jordan tells Nick that Tom is having an affair with a woman in New York. And that is who is on the phone. And that Daisy knows basically about this affair, is not accepting of it, but also is actively not doing anything to stop it. Why is that? Well, that is one of the central parts of the novel that we will talk about as we go on. A lot of students have a lot of different ideas as to why that is. An important quote. This is one of the important quotes of the novel. This is a this is a quote that Daisy says to Nick when Tom, Jordan, I think, has gone to bed and Tom is off doing whatever. And Daisy tells Nick about when she woke up from the anesthetic after giving birth. I woke up out of the ether with an utterly abandoned feeling and asked the nurse right away if it was a boy or a girl. Tom has left. She has no idea where Tom is. She's all alone. The nurse is there. She asks if it was a boy or a girl. She told me it was a girl, and so I turned my head away and wept. All right, I said. I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. Now, what does this quote mean? This quote means that Daisy is absolutely aware of her circumstances in life. This gives us, the reader, and Nick as the narrator, the idea that Daisy is not necessary. She's a victim, but she's not helpless. A lot of the things that she finds herself in right now were choices that she made along the way. She could leave Tom, but why would she? The money is there. The old money, the status is there. Why would she leave Tom? She could choose to be more substantive and less superficial, but why? That does her no good. In this world, in this time period, in this social stratosphere. So keep that in mind. As we look at this quote, someone can be like, oh, she wants her daughter to be a fool. She wants her daughter to survive. And the easiest way for Daisy, in Daisy's mind, the easiest way for her to survive is to be a beautiful little fool. We finish out chapter 1 by finding out that Jordan is a pro golfer and a rumored cheater. We will find out more about that later on. And then Nick leaves the dinner. He goes home and finds who he assumes is Gatsby standing on the lawn, staring across the bay, reaching out, shaking after a green light that's across the bay. We don't really know what's going on yet with Gatsby. It's a very jarring moment in what has been a normal rich white people novel so far. We have all of a sudden this idea that Gatsby is shaking on the lawn. In chapter 2, we are introduced to the Valley of Ashes and the eyes of Dr. TJ.Eckleburg. The Valley of Ashes is this very, kind of lower income area in between the two eggs, East Egg and West Egg. It is not of any money, really. It's not of old money or new money. It's just there. It just exists. It's pretty depressing. It's pretty gray. It's full of ash heaps. And one of the big symbols of this novel is this billboard for an eye doctor named Dr. TJ.Eckleburg. The doctor is no longer in service, but his billboard has gone through severe disrepair and is just sort of still staying up. Sometimes you see that, you're driving around, you see an old advertisement for a business that isn't in existence anymore, but no one's bothered to do anything about it. That is the eyes of Dr. TJ.Eckleburg. It's this billboard with these two big eyes. that are staring, kind of looking right at the shop of George Wilson and his wife, Myrtle. They live upstairs. The car shop is downstairs. George is Tom's mechanic. Myrtle, most importantly, is Tom's mistress. And Nick goes to be introduced by Tom to Tom's mistress. Tom doesn't really care. He doesn't really care to hide that he's cheating on Daisy. Nick's cousin, by the way. He doesn't really care. And Nick kind of gets stuck in this situation. He gets stuck in this situation of being at a party he doesn't want to be at, drunk when he doesn't necessarily want to be, although he does drink. We can't victimize him there. He does drink. He doesn't want to be anywhere. He doesn't want to do any of it. He's just there. He's stuck. But again, that's Nick's best asset, is that he can get stuck in these situations and get information, because there's more talk of Gatsby. This idea that there are rumors that he's related to Kaiser Wilhelm, who's the leader of a European leader at the time, and all of this stuff. So it's this crazy party. They buy a dog. The dog is absolutely a symbol of the way Tom treats Myrtle, right? She's a pet. He shows her around. Oh, look at Myrtle. Everyone look at Myrtle. We find out that Tom takes Myrtle to mutual friend lunches and then just leaves her, as if someone from the Valley of Ashes can converse with people of high society. Myrtle wants to be in high society, but doesn't have the money or the wherewithal to do that. She desperately wants it. She wants the status. That's why she's with Tom, but she doesn't really know how to achieve it. And it's not a question that Tom's abusive, because Myrtle, a little drunk, a little mad, starts to taunt Tom by saying Daisy's name over and over and over again, and Tom punches her in the nose and breaks it. This is a quote from Mark Twain about Jay Gould. Jay Gould was a corrupt businessman of the 1800s, but I wanted to leave us with this quote as we moved on to the next few chapters. The gospel left behind by Jay Gould is doing giant work in our days. Its message is: get money, get it quickly, get it in abundance, get it in prodigious abundance. Get it dishonestly if you can, honestly if you must. Put a pin in that as we talk about and are introduced to the rest kind of our characters in these next few chapters. The symbol of the green light is one that fascinates us all as we read this book. The idea of the green light now in 2020, right, means that green light means go. Back in the 1920s, that may not have been the case. Traffic lights were new, and the color coding was different. So we have placed this idea that the green light is something that Gatsby wants to go to. That may not have been what Fitzgerald was going after. So keep that in mind. The green light is a big symbol. We'll talk about it a lot, but what we say that it means now may not have been what it means back then. Fitzgerald nailed the fact that billboards were going to show up everywhere. When he writes this, billboards are a fairly new idea, but now billboards are everywhere. There are billboards in most towns, and they do fall into this symbol category, right? Because they are this idea of commerce that can then go away, right? A relic of a business gone wrong. Town Topics is the tabloid that Myrtle wants to buy, and is fascinated with. It's also Fitzgerald commenting on his relationship with tabloid journalism. Fitzgerald was one of the first celebrity journalists. He and his wife Zelda were the focus of tabloids all the time. Rumors that were true, rumors that were false. So he definitely includes that because, again, he's only writing this about 2 years after some of the events that took place in his time in New York have happened, and he's definitely writing his life. Prohibition parties did break down some barriers. This was a segregated time most of all. However, along gender lines, before Prohibition, you would not see, like you do at the Love Nest of Myrtle and Tom, men and women drinking together. It wouldn't necessarily happen. It was considered uncouth, not classy, not civilized to do. we start the chapter with the ashes, the valley of ashes. We end the chapter with Myrtle talking about an ashtray. So this idea that, we start with ashes, we end with ashes in this chapter. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it and got something out of it. I probably talked far too longer than I anticipated, but that's okay. If you have any questions about the book at all, comments, concerns, drop them below, and I will try to answer them as best I can. Otherwise, y'all have a fantastic rest of the day.